In 2023, Mike Brown was Coach of the Year. Last week, he was fired the next season after the Kings went 13-18. This is the same coach that brought the Kings from mediocrity into their first playoff appearance in the past 20 years. Results say that teams that fire coaches of the year end up being worse than when they started, and here's the proof. In the last 7 NBA seasons, more coaches of the year have been fired than retained. And in all of the cases, teams have found less success after firing their coach. This tells me that the NBA has a problem with scapegoating their coaches. When things go well, players get the credit, but when things go bad, coaches are the scapegoats. This doesn't make any sense, but at the end of the day, this is a players' league. This is also ultimately why this video will focus on the lack of accountability for poor seasons, and will also uncover what this lack of accountability is truly hiding for every team. As we recently know, Mike Brown was fired after a 5-game skid from the Kings, but of course context is needed. 2 years ago, the Kings were the 3rd seed, overcoming expectations after being the most healthy team in the league. De'Aaron Fox, their leader, ended up as the clutch player of the year and really made a name for himself in his first playoff appearance. The year afterwards, the Kings ended up with almost the same record, 1 game worse, but they added DeRozan in the offseason to supplement their team as a secondary scorer and tertiary facilitator if needed. During this current NBA season, the team is 13-18 at the time of recording and lead the league in clutch losses. While basketball isn't the most simplest game, it's not a complicated game either. And if I was to look at correlations, I would note the regression of De'Aaron Fox as a clutch player. 2 years ago, he was the clutch player of the year. This season, the Kings have the most clutch losses. It's basketball, not rocket science. In order for the Kings to reach the upper echelon teams, Fox, their leader, needs to step up as a player, but has failed to do so. He has also failed in leveling up his game as he is one of the more inconsistent stars. Now there have also been rumors of him eventually leaving the team, and that leads us to the last Pistons game they played. The Kings are up 3, less than 24 seconds left on the clock, and all the Kings need to do is guard the 3, stick to their man, and they should at worst go into overtime. But the Kings, and specifically Fox, collapse instead. Fox does the one thing that can lose the game in this situation. He fouls Jaden Ivey on a 3-point attempt, and Ivey cashes in the 3 before completing the and one to steal the game. While you would expect the leader of a team to take responsibility for making the worst play multiple times in the final seconds of a game, Fox gave about the worst reply you could think of in that scenario, and dismisses the situation entirely. Mike Brown's response might not be what the players want to hear, but nothing he said was wrong in that scenario. The one thing you can't do is foul the 3-point shooter on their finals possession down 3, but Fox was at least 6 feet out from his man. That foul pretty much summed up the issue with this team. Their star players aren't stepping up when needed. This has resulted in stagnancy for the past 2 years, indicated by their record, even with adding another star in DeMar DeRozan to take on some of the lead responsibilities. If they want to be a contender, the stars need to step up, no cut, and in a situation like this, no coaching adjustments are going to save the 13 clutch losses that the Kings have suffered so far. They can't inherently change the lineups that they have to work with. So the issue with the Kings is far from being a coaching problem, and the league seems to agree with me. Multiple notable coaches have been vocal about the firing of a coach who, from the outside looking in, has done nothing wrong, and in fact improved the franchise. This includes Rick Carlisle, Steve Kerr, and most notably Mike Malone. Take note that all of these coaches have been on championship teams and has at least a decade of coaching experience. These are arguably some of the best coaches who know what it takes to win. They've also been through situations where their teams have had a low point and have endured the situation. If they all believe a coach shouldn't be fired, then I'm inclined to listen. And Mike Malone's personal take gives a perspective we need to focus on.
Awful. Yeah, awful. And the reason I say that, Matt, is so we're going into a meeting this afternoon. And, the good thing about me is that I'm not on social media. I'm not aware of what's going on outside these walls sometimes. I've had an office with no windows for 10 years and probably taken off 6 years of my life. And I go into the meeting and the coaches say, "You hear about Mike Brown?" I said, "Why? What happened?" They said he got fired. And at first, I was really shocked and surprised. Then I caught myself. So why am I shocked and surprised? For two reasons. One, because as an NBA head coach, ultimately you're going to get the blame. When they win, it's going to go to Sabonis and Fox. When you lose, it's going to go to Mike Brown. That's the way it works. And two, who he works for. So I'm not surprised that Mike Brown got fired, because I got fired by the same person. And what really pissed me off about it was the fact that they lost last night, 5th game in a row, I believe. Tough loss, fouling a jump shooter. They had practice this morning. He does his post-game media, and he's in his car going to the airport to fly to LA, and they call him on the phone. No class, no balls. That's what I'll say about that.
To me, this was the key that we need to focus on. Coaches catch the blame instead of who really should be the focus. If there's a hierarchy for team construction, it goes ownership, players, then coaches. Ownership sets up the pieces that a team will use to win. The players are the pieces, and their value depends on their skills, and the coaches put the pieces in place in order to maximize their value. So whenever you look at a team that's having issues, you have to look at if the ownership has the pieces in order to win. If that's in place, then you look at if the players have the skills to win. And if those are both true, then the last piece you need to look at is if the coaches are putting players in places to win. Coaching is dependent on the players and ownership, while players are just dependent on the ownership. If we take a look at the Kings, I believe that the issue with the team is with ownership. They didn't bring in the right pieces in order to win. We can look at the main guys on the Kings not stepping up, but the roster as constructed is a bigger issue. This team lacks a defensive identity and has slipped on offense. However, Mike Brown was the fall guy in this situation. A coach can try all he wants in order to win, but if he doesn't have the pieces around him to win, then it doesn't matter how much he tries to maximize the team. I believe that the Kings maxed out in 2022 as the 3rd seed. Both Fox and Sabonis are in their prime. Malik Monk is nearing it at 26, and DeRozan is way past it. It's not on the coach to let them know, but for the people above them to figure it out. There are a lot of other coaches who have been in a similar situation for different franchises. Golden State is surrounded with players with limited skill sets, which makes it hard to maximize Curry. However, the blame tends to go to Steve Kerr, who in reality is a speaking piece for Curry. The Nuggets have recently struggled due to the lack of three-point shooting and a reliable defense. The owner has squandered pieces and their young guys are still developing. However, there's been a lot of feedback for Mike Malone. Feedback is thrown all over the place, but usually it comes to the coach. But sometimes reality needs to kick in and people need to know that the team itself is the problem. In my opinion, coaching needs to be looked at when players aren't being put in positions to benefit the team and maximize their value. But even if players' values are being maximized, that doesn't mean the team is ultimately going to be on a championship level. If we look in the case of the Kings, that seems to be the case. Coaching needs to be treated at a higher regard if players want to be successful in their role, especially when players can raise an issue and force themselves out of a situation if they're unsatisfied. If you're going to be wishy-washy all over the place, how can you expect to have a consistent championship level coach whenever you arrive at a new team? Sure, this is a players' league, but when coaches that have been regarded as the best in a certain season are getting kicked out, maybe it's time to start looking elsewhere for problems. Because if I'm going to be honest about this whole situation, a new coach isn't going to save the Kings. We're looking at a franchise that has only been to the playoff once in the past 13 years. And the only consistency there is at the very top, ownership. So at the end of the day, good luck to all you Kings fans out there. I hope for the best, but I expect the worst.